All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Downey, and I'm a partner with Brivia, and I'm excited to be here today to kick off another webinar in our Brivia series called Moral Injury. What is it and how to stop it? Clearly a topic of great interest, as we have over 400 people registered for today's webinar, which we are so excited about. So thank you for joining us today. I will introduce our guest speaker, Steve de Groot, in just a moment here. But again, thank you for joining. As for those of you, I see some familiar names in the chat. For those of you that have participated in our webinars before, you know we love to interact with the participants. So let's use the chat, let's use the Q&A function, and let's not wait till the end to engage. Steve will probably be asking us some questions. So we really encourage you to engage. And in fact, why don't you let us know? Some people have already started. Let us know where you're joining us from today, because I know we have people joining us from all over. So thank you for that. So let us know where you're coming from. Also know that we're recording today's session. So we will actually make this available. Steve's gonna have a lot of great things to share with you. And if you're scrambling to take some notes, that's okay. We will follow up with a recording that you can listen back to yourself or share with anyone that you feel might be appropriate in doing so. So I will be back at the end of the workshop, of the webinar, to let you know how we could stay connected. But for now, let me introduce to you our special guest speaker. Many of you know him. Steve de Groot is a human behavior enthusiast. Steve has devoted his life to helping. He has done so as an associate professor in human behavior, as a therapist, as the founder of the Getting to Better initiative, and now, of course, is our president at Brivia. Steve's also an author of a Sage publication called Responsive Leadership, which is used in institutions all over the world. And Steve's actually working on his next book as we speak, where he's actually putting into print the core algorithm, which is a dynamic framework for optimizing human potential, which we'll be looking forward to in the fall of 2023. So we'll share more information with you on that when it becomes available. Even give you an opportunity to reserve a copy in advance. But for now, let me introduce my friend and esteemed colleague, Steve de Groot. Steve?
Hey, Chris. Hey, everybody. All right, can you hear me? Am I audible, as they say? All right, awesome. Welcome, everybody. So great to see people on the chat. Welcome to another Brivia webinar, and we are excited to be here. We are talking about moral injury, what it is, how it impacts us, how to stop it. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to situate you to get us started. We're going to do a positive reflection, something I like to do to ground you in your own experience, talk about, and then move into what is moral distress and moral injury. What is it? How does it happen? And most importantly, how does it impact us? And I know for some people here, there's going to be some aha moments, some confirmations and validations. We're going to touch on burnout today. We're going to get into this thing we call burnout and illuminate some of the experiences, but also some of the misconceptions. We're going to talk about how we can minimize and eliminate. I said eliminate moral injury, how we can understand it, eliminate it. And then we're going to offer more than a dozen strategies at the end of the session. So you know we love to do at Brivia. We love to keep things to go from conceptual, theoretical, philosophical, ground them in your experience, and most importantly, give you some things that are practical that you can take away so that you can start working on this thing so that we can feel better, do better, especially at work with the things that are important to us. And I can see people on the line, people that are here, you do very important work. Welcome to everybody. So let's get started. Let's ground you in your experience. One of my favorite things to do. I want you to think about a person at work that you love to work with. Now, I want you to use the chat, okay? I don't want any identifying information, but I want you to think about someone that you love working with. It could be a leader or it could be a team member. I want you to get that person in your mind and in your heart, right? I want you to think about what are the things that makes working with them so great? What are the things that make looking forward to working with them so amazing? So I want you to put that in the chat. If you can think about it. What do they do? What are the qualities of the ingredients of that person that you look forward to working with every day, right? So I want to see you use the chat. I want to see, so laughter, fun, intelligence. I love it. I'm reading the chat. This is going to be great. Flexibility, positivity, support. I love it. Friendly. I love it. Care, support, calm, nice, empathy, beautiful, beautiful, fun. I love it. Respect. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. No wonder. So when people describe working with these people, right? Great energy and smart, respectful, trust. I love it. People talk about going to work with these people. Um, and maybe you're some of them, right? Where you feel energetic, you feel so excited to be there. You're looking forward to going to work. It's actually hard to leave sometimes, right? People talk about being committed, more inspired. I see inclusive in there, positive. People feel socially and emotionally engaged. They often talk about their performance being like at its best. They talk about firing on all cylinders and being unstoppable, right? So, and what's really interesting is when we describe these people at work in these situations where we experience what we call meaning and a positive experience, it's not always in easy times or when there's no stressors, when there's no complex cases, the workload is light. We have all the resources that we need, right? Right? When the market isn't volatile. But what's interesting is some people say they actually go to work in very challenging situations. And we've just been through the pandemic, and for health, there's nothing about it. They're still experiencing it, and many people say that when they work with people that they admire and are inspired by, the work is fulfilling, that it is even positive in challenging moments. So I want to switch gears for a second. I want to go to not so great moments, okay? So let's go. We're going to take a bit of a dip to get into your experience, but have you ever had an experience where you were working with somebody that you admired, who inspired you? Maybe it was a team member or a member, maybe a leader that you respected and that you trusted, that behaved in a way or made decisions that went against your values. What was that like? I want to see that in the chat. Now, no identifying information, right? But feel free to use the chat. Keep it respectful, right? So chaotic right out of the gates, right? So what's interesting is did they go against a horrible, dysfunctional, wow, right, disillusioning, disappointing? So what's interesting is many of us, hopefully you haven't had this experience. I see things like they didn't listen and betrayal, uncomfortable. What's profound about these experiences is sometimes they go against what we value, right? Which is one thing, but sometimes they go against what we have agreed that we all value, right? Right. So I see that was devastating. Wow. I can, in the chat, I mean, you can connect with a series of negative experiences, right? The experiences and the impacts can range from mild to minor, right? To aggravating, to intensely emotional, right? These experiences can have an impact on our level of motivation, right? The chat is lit up. I mean, I'd encourage you to read that, right? We're going to talk about how do we stop these experiences. Our motivation is affected, our commitment is affected, our level of energy is affected. And in many instances, it impacts trust, right? A loss of respect and trust. Sometimes the impact is huge, right? So it can range from what I refer to, right? For those of you who work with me, I love the analogies, right? I love the analogies, right? So I love referring to the impacts of being bumped, right? Some people said, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? It was kind of, it got bumped a bit, right? Maybe it felt like you got bent, which hurt a little bit more. Maybe it was like a bruise, right? When somebody or when we experience the people that we admire behaving or interacting in ways that go against what we've all agreed to. So I refer to this as, the the bumped to burnt, continuum. And it can even feel worse than that. I mean, we see in the chat, it was devastating, absolutely destructive. So let's talk about this, right? How come some behaviors or some people's behaviors can affect us so deeply, right? So let's talk about this. Let's get into this first concept, moral distress. Some of you are probably going, I can connect with that, right? Let's get to it's an umbrella concept that describes the psychological, emotional, and physiological suffering that may be experienced when we act or witness acts that are inconsistent with deeply held ethical values, principles, or moral commitments. That's a mouthful. I don't usually like reading, but I wanted to get the definition right. This is what moral distress is, right? Andrew Jameson was the first to coin this phrase in his book in 1984. Now, we're going to take this a little bit further. Okay, so right now, some of you might be going, yeah, I saw the word distress up there quite a bit, right? A term that we're hearing more and more, especially in the health and human services industry, right? And make no bones about it. I mean, the private industry and the corporate sectors must be aware of this as well because it's happening everywhere. we're going to hear this term more often. It's called moral injury. Takes it up a little bit of a notch, right? So you'll see here that it's, and again, I'm going to read it just to respect the authors and respect what we're talking about. Moral injury is perpetuating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to, learning about the acts transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations, right? This may entail participating or witnessing inhumane or cruel actions, failing to prevent the immoral acts of others, as well as engage in subtle acts or experiencing reactions that upon reflection transgress a moral code. Whew, that was a lot. That was a lot. Sounds serious, right? So I want everyone to know who's just joined us, this is going to get very positive and hopeful. This is the only dip in the presentation, right? It's like, oh, Steve, you should be a motivational speaker. I'm feeling really depressed here, but I want you to connect with this. Right? The reason why this is so serious is that this term, moral injury, was originally described by veterinary affairs clinicians, right, who were having difficult treating post-traumatic stress disorder, that the treatment wasn't having the effect that they wanted. That's how serious this was. So this incongruence, and that's what we refer to it at Brivia. We call it an incongruence, right? We call it a value incongruence, right? We've been referring to value incongruences for years. Actually, we've been calling value incongruences one of the biggest killers of morale for almost 20 years, right? And moral distress and moral injury are the result of value incongruences. Sometimes they're small and sometimes they're big and profound, right? And remember, there's a different range. We talked about that. So you'll see that there's another set of alliterations, right, that I think most people have already talked about in the chat. Sometimes it can feel this value, it can be disconcerting, right? It's a little made me a little bit uncomfortable, right? I'm feeling unsettled with it. Right? And then it can move to distressing, where you're actually distressed about it, or disillusioned. Disillusioned is where it's like I'm now started to not believe, not to trust. I'm becoming disillusioned with the behavior or with the value, right? And demoralized, right? Demoralized fits more for how some people are feeling. We're going to talk about the impacts. Now, it's going to get better. It's actually going to get better. Why is this? So it's interesting because I was talking about why is there a range? Because some of us value different things, right? The other day, just 48 hours on a call with my friends in Australia, some people were talking about leadership non-negotiables. And someone in the room literally said, trust, honesty and being open and honest with employees is, that's negotiable for me. It's not that important. And I can tell you right there, I had more than a disconcerting feeling, right? It was very distressing, right? But imagine working alongside someone every day, right? Every day in an environment where dishonesty was negotiable, or honesty was negotiable, sorry. Maybe integrity is next, or accountability, right? Right. So what makes value incongruence so profound? What is it that makes it so profound? Well, our work at Brivia, and as Chris mentioned, my research on what I call the core algorithm, which is a framework for optimizing human potential and performance, has illuminated a very significant impact that values have, like the huge core requirement, right, for us as humans, right? That values have a massive impact on our experience. The model that we're working with takes very seriously this position of values, and accordingly, values, and it's just a perspective, are the most powerful force and potent force of meaning and human fulfillment, right? So go back, if you can scroll back in the chat, right? If you scroll all the way back, go to that first reflection, right? If you go back to the first reflection, I jotted down some of the words, and what people were saying, that they were the things that contributed to their greatest moments at work, where they felt their best and did their best, were values. People said, I felt cared for, respect, trust, I'm reading my list, support, empathy, fun, positivity, right? Shared goals, purpose. These are all values, like encompassed and packed with values, right? It's not a coincidence when you think of your greatest moments that you're having meaning. When you're in relationships or your environments or systems that reinforce and foster important values, personal values, you feel better, you do better. It's often when we're at our best, right? Even in challenging circumstances. And I think that's what's really important here. Values, according to our work and our research, right, are part of a code, right? I'm just going to back up a bit here. Okay, they're part of a code. back up here. Okay. So one of the things is I don't want to get ahead of myself on a very important point that I want to drop, and I want to go slow about it, right? In our work, right? When you describe that great experience, your living values, as we call it, when a force meets a source. It's no coincidence that when you're feeling your best and doing your best, that it's when those values are being lived and they're in environments where your force of that value, that deep fulfilling power, that energy connects with sources in the environment, right? And that's what creates a meaningful experience, right? We're seeing that more and more and more. And what's amazing, the other things you see is related to core 4. It's other parts of our research, but values provide 3 important things. This is crucial, right? This is absolutely crucial because values, a lot of people think it's what's amazing. You hear the expression, I'm not sure who said it first, that, the most dangerous thing the devil did, right? Or the greatest thing the devil ever did was to convince us all that he didn't exist, right? I think one of the most dangerous things that has happened in leadership is we have forgotten how powerful and important values are. They're more than just words, right? Values have provided 3 important things for humans. First is connection, right? Connection to what? To something important. How about a connection to us together, right? You can't have fun. Well, you can on your own, I guess. That's what Netflix and chips are for, right? But when you think about empathy, right, and respect and care, it's not just a one-person thing. So we're connected with an agreement. Connection represents a bond. It provides direction. How does values for humans provide direction? Well, it provides clarity on what's important. It provides clarity on what behaviors are important, what will strengthen the connection in that agreement. It gives us direction by providing predictability and anticipation, right? If I know that Karen is going to be respectful and caring and positive, I don't have to worry about anything. Not only do I have connection, reinforces that agreement, but I have direction. I know how she's going to respond next time, right? And it's through connection and direction that it provides protection. And this is the important point I wanted to make, is that values help keep us safe. Full stop. It is in this light that values are the highest order factor that represent our humanity and our morality. Now, some of you are thinking about Maslow, I know. Usually comes up about this point, people are like, yeah, well, values are important. Well, we have it on good authority, right? Some very good friends, right? And a couple of articles written for Sage where even Maslow was reconsidering values as a higher order need, right? And see, this is interesting because most of you are here, and thanks for being here. You know this to be true, right? And I want you to, if you have any questions, like I didn't encourage this yet, there's been great action on the chat, but send your questions to the Q&A or make sure you hold on to them because we're going to give some time at the bottom of the hour or so to give to have questions and answers. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I love to be challenged too, because this is heavy stuff, right? You don't have to agree with it. These are perspectives that we got to start sharing because humanity, especially at work, when we look at long-term and short-term disability, right? The flatlining of engagement, there's so many signs that we're not doing well at work. So the impact is huge because connection, direction, and protection is something that's a byproduct. It's why the impact of living our values can be so powerful in moments when they're aligned, right? Our work talks a lot about the importance of connection, direction, and protection, right? You can feel it when you go back to those work moments, those leaders, those teams, those environments and relationships where you were feeling and doing your best, you were feeling connected. You had clear direction. You knew what to expect, right? And most people say, I was safe there, right? I felt comfortable there. I trusted there. And our work at Brivia, right? Some of our research is making the link not only to meaning and motivation, but meaning, motivation, performance, engagement, and even more importantly, what we need more than ever is to strengthen our resilience. That when we're in relationships where we're living our values and having a meaningful experience, we're actually strengthening our own resilience, right? So when you go back to your first reflection, right? When we go back, and I know there's some questions, so keep them coming. Chris and Steve are going to capture them for us, so please keep the questions coming. This is serious stuff. When you go back to that motivated moment, that engaged moment, that focused moment, right? Even in challenging situations. So here's one of my biggest things I want people to think about. Have you ever touched your chest when you were talking about something? See, sometimes we put our hand on our chest because there's a longing to be there. I think of my brother David, or I think of my first place I worked. I think, right? Maybe they're pounding their chest to express the depth of value, like loyalty, pride, I would, I wouldn't. Pay attention the next time someone's touching their chest, the center, the core of who they are, right? Their fist is on their chest. Values are at our core. It's almost a promise. It's woven into the fabric of our humanity. So we're going to get practical. So if you're feeling right now, if you've tuned in and you're like, okay, Steve's getting philosophical, we're going to go right to some very practical strategies. How do we correct this? Because see, the reason why when we're in environments where we're let down, bumped, bent, or bruised, or burnt is when the values get pressed against in an opposite direction. So the power and the potency do not go away. They just get driven in another direction. So when we're in environments or situations, whether it's a slow drip or drastic things that go against behaviors, go against our values, it can compromise that connection. It can cloud direction, and ultimately it undermines that sense of protection that's so important. Which brings me to the impacts, right? This starts to make sense. Sounds pretty serious. It leads to emotional and mental distress, lack of trust in others and ourselves, right? So we start to doubt ourselves. We start to doubt other people. This is where distressing and disillusioning comes in. Feelings of betrayal. I saw that in the chat. People said, I felt betrayed. Anger towards leadership in the organization overall, or the system that they're in, leading to a lot of things like anxiety, depression, addictions. And I didn't put it on the list, but yes, addictions and suicide are there as well. Right? This sounds heavy. Some people, I get to the point, they're like, well, Steve, aren't you just talking about burnout? Right? Aren't you just, this is burnout, right? Well, have you ever felt exhausted? Right? You can put it in the chat, it's rhetorical. Or disconnected from the work or people at work? Have you ever felt ineffective as an employee or as a contributor? Yeah, well, those are what Maslow put forth as burnout, right? But the research makes it very clear, right? That the burnout is due to mostly organizational impediments or organizational factors, right, to doing well, right? And in the case of relationships, right, when they're incongruent, or when behaviors are incongruent, the organization is misaligned or dishonoring values, the impact is huge. But I think what's important to note is there's nothing wrong with you, right? Right. And this is just a perspective. I just want to share it, right? Because in my opinion, we should start to refer to it as burnt, not necessarily burnt out. And I don't want to minimize people's experience, because they say, Steve, I was burnt out. I had to leave, or I was forced to leave. I couldn't get up in the morning. Absolutely. I'm not challenging your experience, but I think what's important is I'm very cautious when we make burnout an individual thing, that it's because you weren't strong enough, or you weren't, right? Because workload, moral injury is not just about workload, right? Right. And the reason why I'm thinking move it from burnt out to burnt is because many of us are still in it, right? We're still here, and unfortunately, many of our brothers and sisters are working wounded, right? Yeah, some are out because they left, but let me be clear: the signs are there. We have been bumped, bent, bruised, and burnt long before we were burnt out. Okay, and there is evidence, especially in health and human services, right, that we will put ourselves at risk. We will put our emotional, mental, physical, spiritual well-being at risk to take care of others, and we have to be aware of that. Now, right, it's not a workload issue, and I want to go slow on this, because workload is important. Is it an important factor? Absolutely. It becomes more important as a factor when it interferes with our family, fun, with our health, with our well-being, right? It becomes much more than just workload. And I had a conversation with somebody today. They're like, yeah, they were 200% overloaded, and they said, I had another job last time, much less stress and much less of a workload. And they go, I was doing poorly there. Like, if you think of your current workload right now, if you think about the workload that you have, and now imagine it in an environment where you don't feel respected, valued, cared for, supported, or that the people are behaving in ways that go against the values that we all agreed upon, right? How would that workload feel? Much heavier psychologically and emotionally, right? Workload is important, and we must continue to strive as organizations to find the balance, to be able to work in a way to do the work that takes the time that we have and the resources that we have to do it in, right? I also want to say to some of those voices that are saying, this is because of the pandemic, Steve, we're doing terrible because of the pandemic. Well, we've been off balance and hurting long before the pandemic, right? The pandemic, has it made it worse? Absolutely. It's been an accelerant and brought more of this stuff, I'll say, to the surface, illuminated some of the things that we've been tolerating for a long time. And now we're like, no, we're not going to do it. We've witnessed firsthand. So Brivia, our company, has witnessed firsthand organizations that did really well through the pandemic. And we also witnessed organizations, small companies, large companies, not do well, and their people not do well. And one of the biggest factors that was clear to us was that the organizations and the leaders in them that were living or making decisions based on their values were doing much better than those that were making decisions that went against the values. Okay. So more than ever, you're probably asking it, we're asking it, what's the point at work? Why should I bother? Why should we do this, right? These questions are a longing. They're like a point to longing. They're pointing an ontological requirement that we are looking for meaning. And here comes the good news. Here comes the good news. Everybody hung in there long enough. Here it comes, right? Our work is starting to show, is the impact terrible? Yes. Are leaders behaving in a way that go against values? Absolutely. But most values incongruences that lead to moral distress and moral injury are unknown. They're unintentional. Yes, they are unfortunate, but we can fix this. We can totally fix this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into some of the strategies, and then we're going to open it up to questions. I'm going to jump into some of the strategies that can help us, and I'm going to say it, not only minimize moral distress, and not only minimize it, but eliminate it, right? We can do this, and we're seeing it in small doses. So let's start at the organizational level. What can companies do, right? Well, at first, ensure that the vision and mission and values are known and understood, okay? Get them off the wall, get them out of that strategic planning binder, right? If you have them, right, get them out there, communicate them so that people, there was a survey done, I think it was 2015 by Modern Survey, and it was like, wow, if employees know and understand the company's values, they're 51 times more likely to perform at higher levels, right? And we were already doing our research on Viktor Frankl and meaning and work and all that stuff. And we're like, yeah, of course, right? And I see in the chat, we got to stop just talking about it. My gosh, no kidding, right? See, because values, if you think about it, values are just words until our actions give them meaning, right? What meaning do we give the values that we have on the wall? Do we breathe life into them, or do we breathe distress and disillusionment and demoralization into them, right? Put systems, so organizations, this is huge. And this came out of a great discussion with our amazing CEO, John Hossack, by the way. Put systems and processes in place that recognize and reward values in practice. Because it's one thing to say it's important. It's one thing, right? But we've got to put very structured processes and systems in place that recognize, that reward values in practice, right? How do we hold people accountable to the behavioral actions so that we can ensure the right kind of accountability? Not the accountability under the bus, blame somebody when something is wrong, but the right kind of positive, proactive, we can reinforce, recognize, and strengthen our values. Use values to guide decision-making. Another great Brivia colleague, Chris Downey, often says, there is no reason why a company should not use their values to make decisions, even the big decisions, small decisions, right? Strategic decisions, operational decisions, people and business processes, right? And if you have to make a decision that's outside of the values or the values that you say are important, you've got to check the value or check the decision, right? Once those things are in place, you can equip, empower, and encourage leaders to role model values in action, right? We see this often when we talk about values in leadership, right? I'm going to put an article out or a post soon. We got to stop using that good boss, bad boss dichotomy. I haven't met a leader that hasn't got up in the morning to be successful. Do some of their behaviors? Yeah, but remember, much of it is unintentional and unknown, right? So we've got to equip and empower leaders, right? First, and then encourage them to role models, values in action, okay? That's for the company. Let's go to leaders. What are some leader strategies, okay? Ensure important values are known and understood, right? If they're out there and if they're on the wall, and I'm gonna back up just a bit here before we get to leaders, and we have a gift for you. I think Steve has already mentioned it. Steve Smith, another awesome team member. I wanted to say that if you don't have vision, mission, and values, we can help you with that. We can help you with that. We love doing it. We're good at it. But if you do have them, sometimes they need to be revisited. Sometimes they need to be rebooted, or sometimes they need to be, modified, reconstructed. Okay. But get back to those as a company. Do those hold value for us? Do those inform us? Did we put those on the wall, right? And they shouldn't be used as a marketing gimmick. They should be used internally, inward facing, right? Which will create the experience for your clients and for your employees. So here, let's get to the leader strategies. Lots of leaders on the line. Ensure important values are known and understood. Okay? If they're out there, get to know them. Develop a shared understanding of what does respect mean to us? What does collaboration mean to us? What does accountability mean to us as we carry out the work? As we, not just in the easy times, not just when we show up and talk around the water cooler, but what does accountability and respect and excellence look like when I have a conflict with Amber? Right? When Chris and I aren't getting along, or when we're making a decision and we're having a disagreement, what does supportive look like? Encourage and support and reinforce values and action. That's the other thing that we encourage people to do, right? Well, first of all, align your actions. Align your actions. Make sure in the morning, right? When you get up, look at those. We do it with Brivia. We've got 4 values too, and I've got to check myself often. Am I being respectful? Am I valuing the relationship, right? Am I being responsible? And am I getting the results that we promised, right? And every day as a leader, I got to try to align my actions and interactions with those important values to the extent possible, right? I'm going to throw those 4 magical words in there because it's impossible to be values led every single day. We're human. We have blind spots. We have the intent impact gap. Encourage and support and reinforce values. Catch people living their values. Sometimes they don't even know. How many days have gone where you have lived the company values and no one said anything? Nobody said, hey, something, Amber, Marguerite, Chris, you did an awesome job today. Thanks for empowering the staff team to be creative, to collaborate together and partner, because that's important to us. Right? Could you imagine if that happened every day or at least once in a while, right? This would be amazing. Get to know the values of your employees. We're going to talk about this. If I'm a leader, if we get to know the values of our employees, I can start to remember when a force meets a source. Remember that? If I understand that my employee values trust and respect and maybe collaboration, I can look into the environment and our values and go, hey, they're not that far off, right? We're going to be doing this with one of our hospital clients next week, right? What values can we operationalize as leaders? What does that mean to the people? And for the people that we're leading, how can we create a meaningful experience, right? I need to know, right, that Rhonda values collaboration and partnership, right? If I know that as a leader, I can look to the environment and go, oh, here's a couple opportunities where she can live her values, our values, create a meaningful experience to drive all of that good stuff, meaning, motivation, excitement, commitment, enthusiasm. So get to know the employees' values and get to know your own, right? We work with a lot of leaders and we talk about, hey, what's important to you? It is not uncommon for them to kind of know, but to not really, really know. So I'm going to give you a values reflection exercise, and I'm going to tell you how to use it so you can actually get to the values within your values, okay? So let's get to individuals. Here we go. Everyone here is an individual, right? The first thing we suggest is acknowledge and believe that there is nothing wrong with you. Whenever we experience living or decisions, actions, interactions, or inactions outside of the values that we deemed important, it's distressing. It's disconcerting. It can be disillusioning, right? There's nothing wrong with you. Learn about and understand the company values. Have conversations about them with your colleagues, with your leaders. Ask questions. Do we have values here? What are they? How should they inform us? Right? Start to make those connections between what's important to you, to your team, and to your company, and trying to make those links so that you can uphold them and reinforce them to the extent possible. The other one is get to know your values. When we're moving through a work environment on any given day, sometimes we can feel great and sometimes we can feel yuck, right? Often that difference is between our values that we're living, right? I'm feeling good when I'm with people, and now I'm not. I'm now doing a feasibility study in a closet by myself and I feel gross, yucky. Well, knowing that relationships and collaboration and fun are 3 of my top values, no wonder I feel yucky here, right? So get to know, tune in to when someone behaves a certain way. Why is it bothering you, right? Once you understand the values that are being rubbed against, tugged against, or stressed, you start to understand, okay, that's what this is. This isn't about blame. This is about naming it, right? Nothing wrong with me, right? So we have a values reflection exercise that that is in the chat. I think Chris will tell you where you can get that as well, to do your own reflection exercise. And then for some people, know when to leave. Know if your leader or your team or your company are not serving you in a way that is good for your well-being, right? Know when to say when. If you've done what you could to try to operationalize the values, and you know that you're experiencing moral distress, you know that you've been morally injured, you know that there's violations happening, then know when it's time to leave. Now, not everybody can leave. So this is the second best thing we can do, right? Because not everybody has the privilege to leave, to just jump, right? And we respect that. We've got bills to pay. We have families to feed. So what we can do is, once we get to know our values, is to look for the values at work. Where can we find meaning? Once I know my top 5 values of relationships and integrity and accountability and collaboration, where can I look in my environment to find meaning? To find meaning in the work, or meaning in my relationships, or meaning in different aspects of my job, right? And what we found is, right, and I had a conversation with a process engineer who was making one product, and that's all she did. And she said that she was really depressed and overwhelmed. And we sat down and I told her how much my family loved that product. And it was kind of funny, but what we started to do was connected what was important to her to what this product could do for other people. And what was amazing is it really made a difference, right? It really made a difference in how she connected to the meaning in her work, right? So search for that meaning in your work. And now I'm going to open it up to questions, but before I go, right, before I hand it over to Chris and start answering some questions and having a brilliant discussion, I just wanted to say the good news here, even though it's heavy, is that we can do something about this, right? And when we identify, acknowledge, live, align, reinforce our values, we do really, really, really well, right? We perform on all cylinders, and we can do that. We have the ability to get to better, to optimize performance potential and our own resilience individually and as a team and as a company. So thank you. I'm going to open it up, pass it to Chris to answer questions. And again, everyone, thanks so much for being here. Let the questions fly.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for those very active chat and Q&A function. So thank you for that. We'll try to get through as many as we can. And just one other piece, Steve also was mentioning the values reflection exercise. There is a link in the chat, quite a ways back in the chat, on how to download it, but we will also send out the values reflection exercise to you. So if you don't have it now, that's okay. We'll get it into your hands. Steve, one of the first questions that popped up, I think it's very relevant. I know you spoke a little bit to this already, but I think it's worth going back over again. And is how do we support employees experiencing moral injury due to policy of governments that are damaging for our client or patients? So if there's policies from the government that are damaging for the clients and patients, how do you support people?
Yeah, well, I think on a program organizational advocacy level, advocate, do the best you can do to protect the well-being of the people that you work with. I think we see it sometimes in systemic racist policies as they pertain to First Nations populations, women, children. Like we see it in different areas. I think from a supporting a person, one of the best things you can do is to listen, right? To validate and affirm their experience as legitimate. Because often we want to help, we want to problem solve, we want to make it better. And sometimes, unfortunately, what we do is we undermine the legitimacy or the inherent value in their experience. I think it's also important to, once we listen, is to ask them what's most important to them, right? What is it that they feel they need in the work, within the environment or within relationships? Because don't underestimate the power that leaders have. Now, I'm not going to minimize some of the serious stuff that happens in value and congruence, but there's a lot of organizations where leaders have the ability as protectors to connect, to direct, right? To be able to operate, to create conditions in the relationship especially, but in the immediate environment to elevate the values that we say are important. So those are the first few things that came to mind. Thank you. Great question.
Excellent, Steve. Yeah, great point. And I think as you highlight, we've had this conversation with many clients before. Validate that experience is real.
Yeah.
And how can we, even given that, how can we make it meaningful? I love that. Yeah. Here's a question and a bit of a comment I think it'd be good for you to respond to, Steve. It's always great to be surrounded by great values, rich people, but don't we, pardon me, But don't we as individuals have the power to shape our day? We are the ones that control reflection, projection, and maladaptive strategies. Self-awareness will set us free. So just what are your thoughts on that idea
Yeah,
we
I
have
love it. It's inspiring. It inspires me right away. It's inspiring. But then the realities hit, right? And I love the idea that we choose how we respond to our environments. But there's a balance. Absolutely, I agree. As humans, we can choose our attitude, we can choose our response. Viktor Frankl has demonstrated that even in concentration camps, right? Man's search for meaning. But I caution because that individual focus on we can do this and we're built to do this has a tendency to lead to what's wrong with you if you can't. What's wrong with you can't be mindful. So we have to be very cautious. Yes, as humans, we're phenomenal. But the reality is, as my research is showing, is we're also interconnected. And our own resilience doesn't come on our own. It comes through a lifetime of relationships and people, regulators and relationships and resources within our environment. So I love it. It's inspiring. I love that we should choose our attitude. The reality is our brain cannot take a lack of connection and disconnection or a lack of clarity for too long, right? We will go into disequilibrium and we will start to dysregulate, which is where leaders come in as a source of co-regulation and a key source of relationship. So I love it. It's inspiring. I think all of us should be able to have good attitudes, choose how we respond, understand what can we control, what can't we control. Those are all really good things. We have to be cautious that when those that can't, that we don't blame them for that inability or that lack of resilience. Okay.
Yep. Awesome, Steve. Thank you. As someone had mentioned earlier in the chat, when values do not match those of the organization, it's only a matter of time before there is a disconnect, and that's bound to happen here. Someone made this comment. I think it is a good one to answer as well. Is that I think this is around when you were talking about you can make a decision to leave if it's possible to do so if you're really online. But the question was this: leaving helps yourself, but how do you help the company or the people that are still there? When do you know we are doomed and not able to make the change?
Well, you have a lucky company. That's why we say exit interviews. So what a great question. Sometimes we're leaving to help the people that are still there. Here's a position I want to illuminate, that sometimes we stay in situations not bringing attention to how bad they are, right? When we leave, it's not that we're just leaving people behind. We are leaving for ourselves. We're leaving to improve things. Before we leave, though, we do what we can to find allies, to give feedback, right? To ask leaders and people in the organization, what's important to us, right? What do we want? What's a good employee look like? What's great leadership look like? What are the values and how do you want us? What do they mean? Do we have a shared understanding? So I think we have an opportunity, but in extreme cases where people feel like they're getting bruised and burnt quite often, and they've made every effort to do that, then when it's time to leave, an exit interview is helpful. A resignation letter is helpful. I had an executive VP a couple months ago read me a very detailed letter, and she felt very bad for it, and said, we could have done something different. So we do what we can to give feedback and to make it as positive and as respectful and dignified and productive as possible.
Excellent, Steve. Just a couple quick ones here. We're getting up to our time here, and I want to try to get through as many of these as can. This is a very practical question. Is it someone, I can't see the name here, but is looking to putting in systems and processes that recognize and reward values and practice. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. Where are some simple places or actions where we can start?
Well, I think every day thanking people. So for starters, have a conversation about the positive behaviors, even if there's no values. What are the things that are supportive, respectful, build trust? So identify those behaviors that you appreciate and start showing admiration, appreciation, acknowledgement as much as possible, right? So do that so that people can identify which behaviors are the ones that are going to be reinforced, right? So that's one of the first things that we can do that. Say thank you more often, right? Ask for feedback, right? Ask how your behavior is being experienced, because there's always an intent impact gap. And a big structure that we often help organizations with is we call it fixing the gate, which is we work with organizations to choose a set of values that they actually protect the gate. So they filter for competencies and they hire for values. Because most issues for discipline are values issues, values-based issues. They're not really competency-based issues. Well, they are, some of them. Most of them are due to choice or lack of choice or a certain type of behavior. So those are the things that I would say get started with.
And I see that it was Brittany that asked that question. Brittany, I encourage you to reach out to us if we could help you out some more with that. Happy to chat with you about that. Steve, one last closing thought I think is worth sharing with you, because I know you have thoughts on this idea that was shared. Does this approach put too much pressure on work to provide purpose and meaning in people's lives? I find that many people expect too much from work and are constantly disappointed. Work is work, not your life. So that goes on from there, but just I want to
Yeah.
closing thought from you.
What a beautiful question. And this is the reason why I'm writing my book. I can hear that you're disappointed, and, we're disappointed and we go, well, why bother? What's the point, right? Or it doesn't really matter. Are we putting too much pressure on a place where we invite people to work to spend more time with us than with their family, right? I know Chris Downey and Brivia, we're trying to look to a future where people can actually do better at work. If you think about it, Brivia is about optimizing performance and eliminating unnecessary suffering. Life has lots of unnecessary suffering, miscarriages, cancer, getting hit by a car, my daughter having an abusive boyfriend. Those are things that I can't control. But when I think about work, should we really be suffering unnecessarily? I think that work, like the church and school and home, is a place where we can be better at controlling the relationships and the environment that we set. Just the beginning, stay tuned. Thank you for the question. It's just a perspective, but I don't think we put enough pressure on work to take better care of their people. But thanks for the question. I would love to talk further. I'm going to pass it back over to Chris. Thanks everybody for being here. Chris.
Awesome. And yes, thank you for sharing that insight, Steve, and for the individual. It was Michael that shared that insight. And thank you so much for putting that in there. Thank you all for your active participation. As I mentioned, the conversation does not have to stop here. If we've touched on something that you're interested in hearing more about, just reach out to us. We're going to be sending a follow-up with a link to the values reflection exercise. We'll send a link to the recording for you to share, and do reach out to us. We love hearing from you. If it's about something that we talked about today, we even to share some more ideas, we're happy to have the conversation. And let us know what you want to hear more about, okay? And take the opportunity to sign up for next month's webinar on how to motivate the unmotivated people. And I realize I just did air quotes and my camera's not on. But thank you, everyone. Keep in touch, and we will see you again soon. Have a great day.